Well, hello, welcome to the YouTube. I'm gonna be honest, I'm really nervous. This is probably gonna come across as really awkward. I'm not super comfortable yet talking for this long in front of a camera, so excuse the awkward little bits and bobs that might not be the most articulate yet. Also, this is my first video that my editor is editing, and not everything is fully ready to go in terms of like the animation for the intro and stuff. So everything might seem a little bit disorganized, and so I really apologize for my part in that. But typically, I wouldn't be uploading a video if it weren't like fully ready to go. But I was really wanting to talk about the upcoming Turning Red movie that's coming out on Disney Plus by Pixar and Disney, and that's something that I really want to talk about before it was released. So yeah, so recently Pixar has announced that they're going to be releasing a movie called Turning Red, and I've seen some discussion online around Disney's love and the history of turning people of color into animals. So this is definitely a pattern of behavior from Disney, and this is just something that I really wanted to talk about and explore within the context of Turning Red and the cultural context of it as well, considering that it is focusing around a little Chinese Canadian girl. Let's get into the animalization of people of color that Disney has historically done, for starters. So we see this in The Princess and the Frog, Brother Bear, Emperor's New Groove, and even Soul when the main character becomes a cat. You could argue that this is seen in movies that focus on white folk as well, like Arthur in The Sword and the Stone and Beast in Beauty and the Beast. However, the ratios of how many POC-led movies there have been and the percentage of those that have a plot that revolve around transitioning into an animal, it's certainly something to discuss. Below, I have linked a really fantastic article and interview that talks more in depth about Black characters, specifically focusing on Princess and the Frog and Soul, and I definitely recommend reading it. Like, Blackness is something that I personally, that's definitely not something that I have the knowledge or the right to speak on, so I definitely recommend the article. And I've pulled a couple photos from the article as well, so full credit goes to them for these types of graphics. There are undeniable adjacent associations that Disney continues to perpetuate in both their media and their amusement parks. I personally find it odd that there is an Asia and an Africa in Animal Kingdom rather than in Epcot at Walt Disney World. While I understand that there are like safaris to cater to and like different continental animals, it's a difficult pill to swallow when I myself have to deal with comments online and in person from people who both hate that I look different and also sexualize my exotic features. And it is almost impossible to claim that there's no correlation between people's impressions of Asian and Black people, particularly women, when they grow up under these precedents. And as a side note, the fact that China and Japan are both in Epcot, and those are, I think, the only Asian countries in Epcot, while the more like Southeast Asian and Southern Asian countries are highlighted in Animal Kingdom, kind of only perpetuates further the historical colorism problems within Asia, with East Asians commonly being treated as like the ideal Asian by the West. So that's just like something to ponder on as well. It's also strange to sidestep racism and these deeply important conversations in these movie plots. It's almost as though they know they don't have the capacity to create these dialogues in an appropriate and responsible way. So instead they create like a fantastical plot that surrounds the character being turned into an animal. So that their otherness is because of the fact that they're now an animal, not because of their race. And the problem with that is that they would rather avoid topics of racism instead of simply inviting people of color to do it in an appropriate way and approach these stories of color in more original ways that also talk about race relations in a kid-friendly, digestible way. So for example, instead of bringing on like more Black creators to The Princess and the Frog and like ask them about maybe going into more depth as to like why Tiana wasn't being given her like shop, because they imply a bit of like racism there, despite the fact that Tiana has the money to buy the shop that she wants to open up. The white landlords won't sell it to her, and like there's definitely some implicit racism there, but instead of just like going out to like Black artists and Black writers and Black chefs and like having that conversation with them on how that could potentially be navigated, it's basically just like dropped as like one line and then she's turned into a frog. They kind of like avoid the conversation instead of like actually like going into it, you know what I mean? Another problem that occurs with this is that it inherently creates a conflation between animal and race. And I know a lot of people will be like, what are you talking about? Whatever, but hear me out. In a deeply entrenched and problematic history where Filipino immigrants from the Philippines to America were put in cages and paraded around in zoos like animals, and Blacks were enslaved and treated like animals, it's a bit sour to have to be reminded of these atrocities without these movies having the delicacy to handle the conversations of race. Also, just like on a corporate level, this type of treatment of people of color kind of indicates to us that businesses don't take people of color seriously and that they don't believe that these movies can succeed without some sort of gimmick. Like, almost like our personal cultures and stories aren't interesting enough to stand on their own without like a fad. And that just kind of sucks for corporations to be implying. Cue Turning Red. Turning Red is an upcoming Pixar movie that's about a Chinese American girl named May who becomes a giant red panda whenever her emotions get the better of her. Now, this movie looks super fun and cute, and I'm super excited for it, but I have seen some criticism for it that reflects like upon yet another casualty of a person of color once again being turned into an animal. However, I want to shed some light onto why I think this movie might be a little bit different from the other movies that Disney has made, and why I personally still have high hopes for this movie. For starters, this movie was made by Domi Shi, a Chinese Canadian, which is already a green flag. She has already created Bao, the Pixar short, which I already feel was like one of the best Pixar shorts that have been made. And I think did a lot of cultural justice to Chinese families. The fact that Disney has brought in someone who has real life experience to be writing stories about Asian Americans is also a really good sign. Now let's talk about why I think that this movie might be a little different than the other movies with regards to the transition into an animal. And this just comes down to Chinese culture. Chinese culture has a deep and intimate relationship with animals and their significance as part of your soul and spirit. So think of Chinese culture having their own version of the Patronus and Harry Potter. This can easily be seen through the Chinese zodiac, where you can either be a rat, cow, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, or pig. And all of these different animals have respective and unique personalities and compatibility charts. For example, a pig is very compatible with a rabbit, but they're incompatible with a tiger. Depending on the time you're born, you can also be a certain element, the 5 elements being fire, wood, water, metal, and earth. So for me personally, I am an earth rabbit. The spiritual relationship with animals can be similar to horoscopes or astrology of other cultures, and therefore puts a cultural significance on May's transition into an animal, rather than it just happening for no reason or for absurdity's sake. So basically what I am guessing is that they're taking like Chinese cultural background and they're spinning some type of like personal mythology to do just like a little tweaking to integrate the red panda in like a fun way. But like the fact that it's rooted in traditional Chinese culture makes that mythology feel less gimmicky and more authentic. Not only this, but in immigrant families, it can be very common for families to not necessarily discuss their feelings. It's common for them to suppress and focus on the logos-based facts and statistics rather than the emotional aspect, which can often lead to feelings being left unresolved despite the conflict having some type of logical conclusion. As a Chinese immigrant, it can be deeply troubling and difficult to reckon with. Like, say you're going to school, and at school, all of your teachers and your friends and your principal are teaching you that you should always use your words and that no one will understand your needs or your wants without explicit communication, and that it's important to be clear and transparent about how you're feeling and how other people's words can affect you. In comparison, like when you go home, just like the way that your mom like puts down the grocery bag on the table is an indicator of like how she's feeling. But like those feelings and moods are never actually addressed. It's all just like implicit understanding from family member to family member in an immigrant family. And this dissonance between how to express emotion and feeling can lead to serious conflict in immigrant children, first generation, second generation, intergenerational trauma. Like, it's something that can trickle down and can cause some serious dissonance within these children. And this could also be shown through the symbolism of May's inability to control her outbursts of passion or anger. And this is expressed through her turning into a giant red panda, because, you know, it's still a kid's movie. But all too often, kids in Chinese culture are told to compartmentalize their emotions, which can cause them to manifest in explosive or erratic ways. This is similar to May, when her heightened emotions can cause her to turn into a red panda. Her transformation could be reflective of the consolidation of emotions in Chinese culture, where it is often widely accepted to not unpack feelings and to just let them fester. At the age of May, which I believe from the trailer she's about 8th grade, all too frequently kids don't properly unpack their feelings and emotions that they have for fear of being considered too girly or being made fun of, or like, oh, like, just be chill, like it was just a joke, etc. I would bet a bunch of money that this movie ends up with May accepting her emotions and accepting that some of her feelings are out of her control, and that acceptance ends up allowing her to control her transition into a panda better than ever. That acceptance helps her to control her power. I would bet money that that's how this movie ends. The creator also mentioned in an interview that the transition of May into a red panda is a silly, fun symbolism of going through puberty, which also adds to the fun coming of age aspect of this movie that helps it transcend just Chinese culture and helps to find some relatability of every kid, because everyone has to go through puberty, everyone has to go through that adolescent age. So beyond just Chinese culture, it helps to lend itself to extreme relatability to anyone watching the movie. So overall, I'm still trying to look at the movie with optimism. I'm hoping that because of these cultural aspects, this movie will be done well And hopefully at least 50% of screen time is May as a human. I would personally think that that's like, that would be really reflective of like a movie that's trying to treat May as a human and not just as like an animal and an other. And I expect there to be a lot of nuance behind her transitions of her powers, as well as like a lot of symbolism both for puberty and Chinese culture and mythology and just like the immigrant experience. And I think a lot of eyes will be on this movie, and I'm eager to know what you guys think. So yeah, leave a comment if you want. I'll be reading all of them because there'll probably be like one or two. But yeah, leave a comment, let me know what you think. I'm personally really, really excited for this movie, and yeah, that's it. For anyone who cares, I wore a little May themed outfit today, so that's it. Details will be on my Instagram, so yeah, thanks. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye.